With the imminent release of Crackdown 3, though, I'll believe it when I see it, I've decided to take a quick look at the game that started it all, the original Crackdown. Now, along with a lot of other Xbox gamers, back in February of 2007, I picked it up mainly because of the little sticker on the front saying free copy of the Halo 3 beta attached onto it. Now, honestly, I didn't really know a thing about this Crackdown game. It looked alright. Hadn't seen much in the way of reviews. To be fair, screenshots didn't really show much that was particularly interesting. But, hell, you want a game like Halo, may as well play the game that comes with it. I mean, fully realise that looking back, it's a hell of a waste of 30 quid buying a game exclusively for the added little extra, but yeah, that's part of the story. With the improvements made with the Xbox One and Xbox One X, I've decided to jump back and play on new hardware rather than sort of rooting out my old Xbox 360. I'll also admit that that's in part because I don't have a HDMI capture card, so a little bit easier going through the Xbox One X. So the footage you'll see is all taken through the One X, so it'll be a little bit more high definition than you'll remember. It's also 4K scaled down to 1080p, so it's pretty much the best way to play it in my opinion, and other than on a large 4K screen anyway, but should be able to get the best images across to you. Now, pretty much as soon as you load the game up, you'll note the same thing I have about the fonts being used. Now, to be fair, I remember this being identically bad back in the day, so I'd say it hasn't aged well, but no, that was just bad. Once bad, always bad on that one. Loading times are pretty much as bad as I remember them, but so we've got the introduction movies. Again, they, other than the god-awful typography still, the intros actually have aged pretty well. Now, I'm going to assume these will be re-rendered for like higher spec devices, but yeah, to be fair, part of the thing they've done with it is they've not aimed particularly high, so they've pretty much achieved something that will work for, I'd say, generations to come, but I don't reckon it's going to last much longer as it is. It's a unique and distinct look. I think these days the thing that would hark back to me would be Agents of Mayhem, and that sort of setup with the more true comic book hero feel. But so jumping in, standard vehicle setup. This was one of the things that did frustrate me a little in terms of fetching decent agency vehicles from the central hub spot. That's something that in most modern games of this kind, I'm mainly thinking of Saints Row and Agents of Mayhem, which you'll be more expecting to drop stuff in as and where you want. That was one of the things that annoyed a little bit from the original game, the constant interludes from the intel briefings. Now, I'll admit that for the first couple of these this time around I did try and bring myself to listen, but yeah, they more detract. It's nice to have a little bit of storyline going, but as mentioned with the previous criticisms, one of the things that more recent games like the Saints Row, the later Saints Row games have done better, is kind of dispensing a little with the seriousness. It's kind of interesting with Crackdown because that was always part of the charm, and that you got the dissonance between the serious and the utterly comic nature of it. Now, so early in the game I'm not used to the lack of explosions compared to when I last played, but generally the first thing I'll do in any of those open world games is completely ignore the instructions I'm given, which I maintain is the best way to play any of these. And about 30 seconds into the game, I've already successfully got myself targeted by both the Peacekeepers and the Last Mitas, which is pretty much how I remember the entire game going. You make an attempt to save some civilians, accidentally kill a few, get the Peacekeepers on you, cue large rampage. So I figure this early in the game, I'm probably just going to have to run away and not get myself killed, given all I have is basic weaponry. Now, some of the basic mechanics, like the driving, hasn't really deviated that much from more modern games of the sort. I think one of the things that started to happen was they got the general control scheme for driving in this sort of game up to par. So it seems I made the mistake of actually going for the first objective I'm told to go for, which it's madness. And given an open world, and actually following the mission markers, that's what I'm doing. Now, you do start to see me trying to get to grips with the controls where they're not exactly how you'd imagine. There are a few little subtleties with the snapping and some very odd camera behaviour. It's not too bad, and once you get the hang of it, it all does work out. Like, there's some niceties to work with. The variety of weapons you start off with are not particularly good. On the plus side, given I've got the DLC set up, getting a decent amount of explosives and large caliber weapons gets you into that Crackdown feel straight from the start. The general lighting and texture improvements have come in pretty nicely with the 1X port, though you'll note as I'm playing a lot of the more frustrating things about the game, the general camera issues, the constant interruptions with Intel, and that sort of thing. They're enough to frustrate, and one of the things that stopped, in my opinion, Crackdown being a major triumph of gaming, but to be fair, they addressed a lot of the worst of it with Crackdown 2, and really hoping they'll have learnt those remaining lessons when it comes to Crackdown 3. Remains to be seen, I suppose. One of the most important things in any open world game like this is the ability to completely ignore the objective you're supposed to be taking. And that's something I absolutely loved Crackdown 4. Again, mirrored in a lot of more recent games, but being able to just start taking down the bosses of the gangs without even finishing the tutorial you're set up with. It's not entirely trivial to do. Notably in this, having the Gatling gun as an option really did make light work of a lot of the enemies. Also gave me a good chance to remember how the shooting controls actually worked. And the little subtleties of the hold and enhance the aim and that sort of thing, which you don't really see in most games of this style. But it works for what it is. It's not stellar, but as mentioned, it's something they improved upon in the later games, and you sort of refine a formula rather than needing to overhaul it more massively. This is one of the things that frustrated me a little bit back in the day as well. Despite getting to grips with the controls finally, having some trouble actually locating the enemies I'm trying to deal with. Now, I genuinely wasn't sure at this point whether he was inside the building, whether there were some criteria I needed. Now, if you notice in the corner of the camera there, turns out I'm just on a balcony. So you'll see for the next few minutes, I managed to have no idea what the heck I was doing. It's one of those, you eventually figure out where you are, but it's little bits of UI tweaks, like, they're now taken for granted. Tiny little up and down arrows for what height you're at. It really just takes the edge off of what should be a nice experience, but just frustrates for a few minutes. I mean, once you get down to it, once you manage to find him, you kind of get through it all, but still just these little frustrations. Finally realizing that there's a bottom floor to this structure. And start taking out some of the more interesting stuff. Now the zonal targeting on vehicles is something I don't think I've seen in any other game since. At this point I've finally managed to actually find the boss I've been chasing down. It's the unsatisfying nature of some of these fights that it just becomes stand next to boss and pile bullets into him while he fails to shoot back at you. Which, I mean, makes it easier, but it's one of the little things that kept Crackdown from really being a great game other than being a good and entertaining game. And once again, plagued by the constant Intel announcements. On the plus side, you then get back to seeing that take a few seconds around the corner and you're into new activities, which is one of the beautiful things. Again, it's now kind of typical in all these open world games, but the fact that you'd come literally straight out of here and boom, there's a race marker. And admittedly, I appear to have completely missed that marker. Drive past it. This is one of the little things about getting back to this game. You remember most of the little tweaks, but just the occasional things will catch you out. I guess that's the problem after 12 years of not playing the damn thing. This is where you get to finally try and get to grips with the driving mechanics in a little bit more detail. And to be fair, they're pretty solid, but see, as I try and take certain corners, now I'm not a stellar gamer by any stretch of the imagination, but you'll see back there with the car just flipping off the tiniest little lump in scenery. I imagine with a little more detail in scenery as we get these days, that will become a little bit easier, but it's, again... I feel like I'm just beating on the poor defenseless puppy of a game at this point. But all these things, they are really very minor, and at the time, and even now, they don't really take away from the enjoyment. Part of the thing is, you compare this to games now and not that long ago. Anything by Bethesda is a great example, where you just learn to look past the bugs and the annoying overlays that interrupt the action every 5 minutes. I mean, Jesus, can we just get past them now? Good. Yeah, there's enough people looking past the issues with Fallout 4 and Fallout 3, and as good as it is, Skyrim, that you kind of learn to realize, however good a game is, it's about something more than just whether it's bug-free, but whether the quality of gameplay that you're getting out of it justifies the the presence of a few little issues, which, I mean, having just sunk 2 hours into a game I've played to death in the past, oh yeah, they're really outplayed by the... I fully believe that the pros outweigh the cons in this example.
Replacement cloned forms are always in hand, ready to receive your established personality and performance data.
It's one of the things I did like in particular about this game, and still find satisfying to this day, is the progression mechanic. Now it does peter out a little bit to the end in places, like there's the frustration of chasing down all of the agility orbs, but the visualization of the orbs plopping out of the enemies every time you defeat them it's something you'd more expect out of a fantasy RPG, but it's hard to describe that satisfaction you get from taking down a large number of enemies and then just having the orbs flow into you and leveling up. It's something they've actually engineered pretty well. It does, however, lead occasionally to some slightly obsessive moments where just because you want to level up your strength stat, you just end up punching to death as many enemies as you possibly can. Which the section kind of draws attention to another of the minor quirks that gets a little bit frustrating. There's a little issue with the melee controls, in that given whenever you press the melee button, you launch an attack in the direction you are currently facing, that's where your character's facing, rather than where your stick's pointing, which is a tiny little tweak that most modern games have got right beyond that point. But again, it's not enough to detract massively from the game, but you've got to get used to it, and I think part of the problem is now, with this standard of controls for games in general, we're used to not having to get used to such minor little issues. I suppose that can be seen as a bit of a downside for modern gaming, in that there's less room for innovation outside of some of the quality indie titles there are out there, but I don't know. There's probably some rose-tinted glasses moments there for loving the moment in old games where you had to learn which weird set of new controls they would have added, and again with the ruthlessly punching to death enemies. Yeah, getting used to the individual set of controls rather than having the standardization of like any modern shooter of today, where you can pick up and have some standard of iron sights, knowing exactly where everything's going to be and that sort of thing. It's a subtle thing, but always worth considering when you try and put older games into context, that they might not have had it so easy. In terms of some of the things I remember spending the most time working on, as mentioned before, it's kind of a mixed blessing, but trying to root out all of the agility orbs and hunt through the weird architecture they've thrown together for this game was kind of an absolute pleasure in a way. There was a little bit of frustration when, as I'm running through now, just trying to find what the solution is to get to the convoluted area, but given the number of people that play text adventure games, and point-and-click adventure games as well, the fruitlessly trying to make that ledge, the willingness to get through a bit of obscure puzzling should be in most gamers' arsenals by now. Admittedly, it won't be up for everyone's cup of... rewind a little bit. Admittedly, it won't be everyone's cup of tea, but it's an entertaining diversion, and kind of lets you split things up, which, again, it's a recipe you see in pretty much any good modern like sandbox action game, of trying to give as many different conflicting objectives as possible. Crackdown did quite well in that, and its sequels, I suppose, of giving you the star ratings as almost an objective measure of how well you've done in the different sets of objectives. More directly translates to the driving and agility skills, but you kind of got to see if you'd bothered to balance your development properly, and as well as providing like concrete benefits. Yeah, the subtle thing of just getting the little explosion anytime you level up as well. They've done really well in making a genuine sense of satisfaction for one meaningless number increasing in the corner of the screen. Which, when I put it that way, it does make it slightly depressing for the number of hours I put into this game. So well apart from the slightly more serene feeling of cruising across the building tops. A slightly more extreme way of dealing with the gang violence. And this is a lot more like the Crackdown I remember. The ability to just, for absolute carnage, something that I hadn't seen anything again until the Saints Row game put it off in quite the same level of freedom. Now, I'm pretty sure this is not how you're supposed to complete this mission, but again, there is nothing more satisfying than throwing an utterly ridiculous number of rockets at a problem that a handful of bullets probably would have solved. You do get some occasional confusion on the controls here. I have managed to master sending these strange, spirally pathed rockets shooting right back at myself. Which, again, I'm pretty sure that's not how this game was designed. But even then, little things I've left in, like the rocket path being so unpredictable, it just kind of adds to the confusion and the fun. Perfect example. And a little bit of physics going on. This is a sort of chaos I genuinely hadn't seen in anything before. I mean, you had the Red Faction 2, I think. It's the first great destruction I've seen in a game, but that had the very simplified physics setups of just making holes in things versus just flooring entire stacks of crates in a shipping yard. And I'm not going to claim that I'm under the illusion that that wasn't a semi-scripted event going on to add to the cinematic experience here, but I don't care. The way they've dropped it in there, I had no idea that was coming. Like, even after playing for the game the length of time I had, there's just little bits and pieces they dropped in there. I mean, on the other hand, you then get the ridiculous, there are vehicles, and the vehicle just keeps spawning and spawning, which is the thing that slows me down most in this mission, and the tiny little objects clipping, and I'd like to claim I was frustrated with them, but looking back on footage, everything here was just doop doop de doop, I'm gonna blow you up. Oh no, you're up too close. I'll blow you up anyway. It's just the unbridled joy. The other little thing that I hadn't noticed until running through here was how much of this content they'd reused for Crackdown 2. Now I'm aware they sort of reskinned the entire thing, put better textures on it all. But coming around the outside of this place and noting, I believe it's actually the starting area, or at very least one of the areas I spent my time around most in the early game. And that led to one of my biggest frustrations in the second game. The reuse of content was disappointing. Now, admittedly, they'd made it unique and distinct by adding zombies and blowing bits up. But to be entirely honest, that is exactly as disappointing as it was to me. It's I'm not going to claim to know, and I'm probably going to do some research after I finish this video into why all that happened, whether or not there were development cuts, or whether they truly set out to cut such corners in the second game, but I don't know. It's why, despite the gameplay improvements made in the second, the first just has something. Just has a little bit of something. I don't know. It's most likely just again the rose-tinted glasses hitting up, but I don't know. It just feels a little more complete, I suppose. So finishing up with some quality, completely proportionate levels of force. How I feel overall, I mean, it's been a fun night reliving Crackdown. Now, I'm not going to pretend that without the facelift that the 1X enhancements have given this, it would go on par with any game today. You've seen the footage even now. The textures they're improved, but this isn't a modern game. You could get away with selling something of this build quality as an indie game, I suppose, but nothing AAA about it. On the other hand, this is on quite a short list of games that have been made backwards compatible that I will get out and play some more. Certainly going to be trying to call for a little bit of co-op action to just throw some chaos around. It definitely has made me a little bit more excited to play Crackdown 3 itself when it comes out. Hopefully it comes out. I'm sure it'll come out. So I hope you enjoyed watching that. I'm quite enjoying the current couple of videos I've done, going back through some games I played quite a long time ago. I mean, thinking back, 12 years now, almost to the day. Very different times in terms of gaming and life in general. Far more relaxing times for me, certainly. I hope everyone else watching is looking forward to Crackdown 3 as much as I am, with the assumption that it'll ever come out. But yeah, Game Pass is certainly going to make that a bit of a game changer. It makes me a little less concerned about not enjoying it. I mean, I'll be highly disappointed if it doesn't turn out to be everything it's touted, but I'm sure it'll at least cover the bases in terms of a bit of mindless violence, which that's what everyone really needs out of a game, right? Anyway, thanks for watching. As always, drop me a shout in the comments if there's anything you thought I can improve or enjoyed in particular, and hope you watch any future videos. It's certainly going to be a little bit more content around gaming, I think. It's certainly something I can be passionate about in future videos. So yeah, have a good day, and see you around.